a powerful nuclear bomb dropped by the B-29 entitled Enola Gay. This unprecedented attack hastened the Japanese surrender. To make the attack possible, a top-secret mission was carried out. Almost a month earlier, on July 16th, the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis sailed from the San Francisco harbor, carrying a super-secret cargo. The ship carried in its holds a valuable cargo of enriched uranium and parts that would be used to assemble Little Boy, the name given to the Hiroshima bomb. The ship sailed unescorted and at high speed, bound for Tinian in the Mariana Islands, where it would unload the precious cargo. After accomplishing its mission, in total secrecy and without escort, the USS Indianapolis headed for Okinawa to join Task Force 95 in the Pacific. But although the U.S. Navy dominated most of the Pacific Ocean at this time, Japanese submarines were still active in this war zone. At midnight on July 30th, 1945, Japanese submarine commander Mochitsura Hashimoto sighted the Indianapolis. The Japanese officer ordered the firing of 2 torpedoes at the USS Indianapolis. The ship was hit hard by the 2 Japanese torpedoes and began to sink rapidly. The order to abandon ship was issued for the 1,195 crew members to leave the vessel immediately. Nearly 300 men lost their lives in less than 12 minutes, the time it took for the USS Indianapolis to become completely submerged. Many of the survivors who escaped from the ship did not have life jackets, and there were few lifeboats for the nearly 900 men trying to survive. Even worse, the waters were infested with sharks, and because of the mission's secrecy, no one knew the wreck's location, and it was not possible to send a distress call. It wasn't long before the first attacks. Almost 100 men were devoured by sharks in the first hours after the shipwreck. There was another problem. The fuel from the USS Indianapolis formed a large oil slick on the water surface. This oil was toxic, causing the shipwrecked men to vomit, accelerating the dehydration process. Days passed with no sign of rescue. The men began to suffer greatly from dehydration, even though they were surrounded by water. But salt water, when consumed, accelerates the dehydration process of the body's cells. Many lost their lives drinking the seawater desperately. Meanwhile, the sharks continued to make new victims or feast on the corpses. After 4 days adrift at sea, the crew of a bomber plane happened to find the Indianapolis castaways and issued a rescue call. A Catalina seaplane was the first to arrive to rescue the men. Soon after, the escort destroyer USS Doyle appeared, along with other ships to collect the men from the water. Only 316 of the original 1,195 crew survived the sinking. Captain Charles McVeigh was sued for negligence and held responsible for the sinking and deaths of his men. Commander Hashimoto, who sank the Indianapolis, was his defense witness, and for that he was given a more lenient sentence. But many relatives of the deceased crew members blamed the captain. This led him to suicide. The USS Indianapolis crew paid a high price to accomplish one of World War II's most secretive missions. To this day, the USS Indianapolis sinking is the greatest naval tragedy of the United States Navy. On November 30th, 1939, Stalin, the Soviet Union leader, commanded a major offensive against Finland, kicking off the conflict that would become known as the Winter War. The Russians predicted a crushing victory, but did not count on the Finnish tenacious defense of their territory. The Finns resorted to guerrilla tactics and claimed a high price for every step the Soviets took on their soil. But one sniper became the symbol of this heroic resilience. His name was Simo Haya, and he would become world-renowned by the nickname White Death. Simo Haya was just a farmer and his hobby was hunting, where he showed already all his ability with his rifle and sharp shooting. But his quiet life would end with the beginning of the war, when he was drafted to serve as a sniper. In his early youth, when he did his military service, Simo excelled among the others for his excellent marksmanship with a variant of the Soviet Mosin Nagant rifle. But he also showcased proficiency in the use of the Sumy M31 submachine gun, as well as being a competent skier. Simo became one of the biggest nightmares of Stalin's army. Thoroughly camouflaged and using his rifle without a telescope sight to keep the lens reflection from revealing his position, he started hunting the enemy. The Russian soldiers were trapped by Simo and fell by the dozens. The Finn shot 25 enemies in a single day, shattering the morale of the Red Army combatants. However, the Soviet Army also had its snipers, who would reach legendary status during World War II. They targeted Finnish officers and sergeants, and one of them proved to be particularly effective. Simo was assigned the mission of taking out this dreaded Soviet sniper. The Finn tracked down his opponent's hideout and laid in the snow for hours on a freezing day, waiting for his enemy to reveal himself. To keep his breath from creating steam clouds, he often put snow in his mouth. After waiting for hours, the Soviet sniper stood up to leave, and this was the opportunity Simo had been waiting for. With one clean shot, he took out the sniper who was tormenting his countrymen. One of his main tasks would be to hunt down the Soviet snipers. As the White Death legend continued to grow, the Finnish sniper hunt was given more attention. Marksmen and even heavy artillery were used by the Soviets to try and neutralize the threat Simo represented by putting a hefty bounty on his head. After having 200 Soviet kills confirmed, Simo Haya was awarded an honorary Sako M2830 rifle, which is housed today in the Finnish Military Museum. During the war, Simo reached the milestone of about 500 enemy kills in just 100 days, making him the greatest sniper of all time. However, with only 1 week to go before the end of the war, Simo Haya was shot in the face by a Soviet soldier. He was badly disfigured by the explosive bullet, but managed to survive. The war would end on March 13, 1940. Simo Haya was exalted to the status of Finnish hero and awarded several decorations. He would return to his farm, where he would live until the age of 96, dying in 2002. But the legend of the White Death will never be forgotten. Henry Tandey is the British soldier who won the most medals during the First World War. His bravery in battle made him almost a legend. On September 12, 1918, during the Battle of Havrincourt Canal, Tandey led an attack while under heavy fire. He was able to take a number of enemy trenches and many prisoners, including a key enemy officer. Also, later that same day, he put his life in danger to help 2 hurt cops who were in a heavily fired-upon area. He was given the Victoria Cross, which is the greatest honor in the British Army. But the thing that made Henry Tandey famous was something that happened at the Battle of Marcoing on September 28, 1918. During an attack, Henry Tandey saw a German soldier who was hurt and had no weapons. Even though the Briton had the soldier in his sights, he chose not to kill him because the fight was already over and the soldier wasn't a real threat. The German soldier ran away, but not before telling the British hero how kind he was. No good deed goes unpunished, as the old saying goes. This German fighter was saved by Tandey. 15 years later, he became Chancellor of Germany and led the world into the most destructive war in history. Adolf Hitler saw Henry Tandey in a picture of his actions in battle and knew that he was the person who saved his life. Henry Tandey had no way of knowing that his kind act would have such a bad result. During the Second World War, the remote Ramry Island, a forsaken landmass in the turbid waters of the Bay of Bengal, was the scene of one of the war's darkest events. This Burmese island was vital strategically and provided a linchpin for the region's maritime control.
but lurking beneath the water's surface were creatures that would become a nightmare for the Japanese soldiers. The Japanese arrival on Ramry was not met with much resistance. With its mangrove topography and thick jungle, the island was sparsely inhabited and offered ideal natural defense options. The Japanese soldiers rapidly adapted to the environment and prepared for any invasion attempt, conscious of the island's strategic importance in controlling sea routes and defending the wider Japanese territory. By January 1945, the waters near Ramry Island bore witness to the distant roar of engines. A fleet of Allied ships breached the horizon. The British forces, escorted by Indian units of soldiers, were bent on reclaiming Ramry. The battle was initially marked by heavy naval and aerial bombardment by the Allies, designed to weaken the Japanese defenses before the landings. While the Japanese forces were thoroughly trained, they were completely taken by surprise by the magnitude and precision of the attack. Yet they fought back with fierce resistance, resorting to their fortified positions to deal heavy casualties to the attackers. With the break of dawn, the Allies made their landing on the Ramry beaches. British and Indian soldiers pushed forward under heavy fire, encountering landmines and fierce shooting. Every meter of ground gained tested their courage and resilience under the most adverse conditions. As the battle intensified, the Japanese forces started to retreat into the island's hinterland, using guerrilla tactics to stall the Allied advance. This stage of the battle was characterized by hand-to-hand combat, ambushes, and a death-defying cat-and-mouse standoff. The difficult terrain, together with the suffocating heat and humidity, tested the physical and mental limits of the soldiers on both sides. The Japanese defensive tactics were ruthless and effective, seriously hampering the invaders. But the Allies' numerical and logistical supremacy was beginning to turn the tide in their favor. Notwithstanding fierce resistance, the Japanese forces were gradually being surrounded and isolated, their supply lines cut off. This initial period of the battle, while having its share of strategic success for the Allies, was marred by brutality and a human cost that heralded the horrors that lay ahead in the fight for Ramry Island. The Japanese soldiers desperately decided to ring the retreat bell. They ran towards the mangroves, expecting the British to stop their pursuit. But the soldiers quickly learned that those waters harbored enemies even more ruthless than the armed men who followed them. These mangroves stretched out like a swampy labyrinth, a patchwork of roots and mud, beneath an oppressively heavy sky. While the Japanese ventured deeper, the feeling of isolation grew. The dense vegetation and stagnant water hid lurking dangers. Eerie sounds broke the silence, and, with every step, the treacherous terrain seemed to swallow them up. The blistering heat and humidity made retreating a grueling chore, setting the stage for a night that would go down forever in the annals of war as a pure horror story. Night fell over Ramry with thick darkness, bringing with it the nightmare. From the mangrove shadows, reptilian eyes glittered with an ancient appetite. Giant crocodiles emerged silently from the dark waters. The ensuing scene was a horrific symphony as these beasts started their sinister banquet. Exhausted and bewildered, the Japanese soldiers could hardly believe their eyes and ears. Terrified squeals ripped through the night, each one signaling another fate sealed in the unforgiving jaws of these predators. Once a mere obstacle, the water became a slaughter ground. The psychological terror, just as palpable as the physical attacks, raged like wildfire. Some soldiers fought frantically against the beasts, while others were immobilized by fear, their minds powerless to deal with their distorted reality. As dawn finally broke, the mangrove swamp was a hushed testament to the night's massacre. The few surviving Japanese soldiers, battered and shaken, found themselves in an utterly chaotic condition. A battle between men had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Driven by a primitive instinct, these warriors searched for strategies to escape the predators and the natural labyrinth in which they were trapped. Some took the risk of swimming across infested waters, while others sought refuge on tiny islets. Each decision was a wager between life and a terrible death. Haunted by the previous night's events, the soldiers pressed on, driven by the simple will to live. Historical accounts vary, but estimates indicate that only 500 of the 1,000 men who entered the swamp survived the appalling undertaking. The remainder met a tragic end, victims of both the hostile conditions and the region's natural predators. This terrifying night was subsequently identified as one of the largest crocodile attacks on humans in history. The trauma for the few survivors was long-lasting and profound. They came out of the mangroves not only physically depleted, but also psychologically devastated. The horror of witnessing comrades being swept to their deaths by the murky waters, the feeling of helplessness before an unrelenting non-human enemy, and the ever-present threat to their own lives left scars that went beyond physical wounds. With its grim outcome and the gruesome losses suffered by the Japanese, the Battle of Ramry Island is a haunting reminder of the horrors of war and nature's unpredictable hazards. The survivors bore with them not only the battle scars, but also the memories of a hard-fought struggle for survival against almost unbelievable odds.
An old saying advises not to bring a knife to a gunfight. But this motto did not fit Mad Jack, a man who fought in World War II with bow, arrow, and sword. British Lieutenant Colonel John Churchill of the Manchester Regiment fought in France in 1940 against the Germans. According to some accounts, he was the last man to kill an enemy in combat with a bow and arrow. But he later confessed that this had never happened, because his bow had suffered damage. Still, he preferred to let the legend spread. In the West, officers' swords were used in a purely ceremonial way, but John Churchill believed that any officer without a sword was improperly attired. Therefore, he always had his on. One of his most remarkable acts happened during the invasion of Italy, when he captured more than 40 German soldiers using his famous Kleiberg sword. Mad Jack was also known as an accomplished bagpipe player. When he was captured by his enemies, it is said that he played his instrument on the battlefield until he was hit by an explosive. He also received special treatment from the Germans, as they believed him to be a close relative of Winston Churchill. But a prison camp could never limit John Churchill. Twice he was captured, and twice he escaped. After the victory in Europe, Jack Churchill was sent to war in the Pacific. However, the conflict ceased before his arrival, which he regretted, saying that he could have fought for another 10 years if not for the Yankees. This unusual warrior also participated in the 1948 Palestinian War on the side of the Israelis. For all his achievements, he was awarded the Military Cross and the Distinguished Service Order. Denmark has a warlike past. Its Viking warriors ruled the Baltic and North Seas, ravaging distant nations with the horrors of war. By 1940, however, Denmark was very different. The country had become a peaceful nation, and the army was only a shadow of its glorious past. As Central Europe mobilized to face the threat of Nazi Germany, the Danes preferred to remain neutral in the conflict, going about their usual daily lives. But Little Denmark, despite its neutrality, was a bottleneck in the German expansion plans. Therefore, on April 9, 1940, the Germans initiated Operation Weserübung, whose aim was to conquer Denmark and Norway. On the day of the invasion of Denmark, German ambassador contacted the Danish government. He said that the German army would invade the country and that the Danish forces were not to resist, as the Germans would enter the territory to protect the neighboring country against a British invasion. But before he received an answer from the Danes, German troops were already moving inside Denmark. The Germans were invading by land and sea, with amphibious and aerial landings using paratroopers. The Danish army was very thin. There were only 30,000 soldiers, and their equipment was mostly old-fashioned. But despite this great disadvantage, they rapidly did their duty. An order was given to conquer the royal palace and to capture King Christian X with the aim of forcing the Danish surrender. But the resistance of the few but brave Danish fighters made it possible to hold off the attack on the royal palace, and the king managed to escape. German psychological warfare came into play. Leaflets were poured over the major Danish cities, warning that if they did not surrender, the cities would be razed to the ground by the mighty Luftwaffe bombers. The king, along with the Danish High Command, was given an ultimatum to lay down arms and accept a peaceful surrender. Otherwise, the beautiful cities would be flattened by German bombers and artillery. Unable to resist a vastly superior enemy, the Danish government capitulated. It took less than a day of war for the German troops to march sovereignly into Denmark. Under the terms of the peace treaty, the Danish government was able to retain some autonomy by opting for a bloodless surrender. However, decisions would henceforth be overseen by the Germans. The long period of German territorial occupation, together with the abuses, increased the hatred against the invaders day by day. As a result, the Germans decided to take control of the country. They dissolved the local government, and the Gestapo started persecuting the dissenters. Resistance cells sprang up all over the country, actively working to help the country's Jews who were suffering from German persecution. Towards the end of the war, the Danish economy collapsed. Famine spread across the country, and many people lost their lives to starvation. The Danish people were only freed from the Nazi shackles in 1945. With this, they were able to rebuild their economy, peacefully becoming one of Europe's countries with the highest per capita income.
The M1 Garand rifle is an iconic weapon that performed a significant role in United States military history. Initially developed by Canadian-American engineer John C. Garand, the M1 Garand was officially adopted as the primary infantry rifle of the United States Armed Forces in 1936. The M1 Garand is known for its semi-automatic system design, allowing soldiers to shoot faster and more efficiently compared to the bolt-action rifles common at the time. The rifle employed an en-bloc clip to hold and feed its shells. Holding 8 cartridges, the en-bloc clip was directly inserted into the rifle's magazine, expediting the reloading process and making the weapon more efficient in combat. As soon as all the cartridges were fired, the empty clip was automatically ejected, allowing the quick insertion of a new clip. The M1A1 is one of the Thompson submachine gun's many versions. First introduced in 1942, the M1A1 was a scaled-down and less expensive version of the M1928 model that was a gangster favorite, already in use prior to the United States entry into World War II on a lesser extent. The Thompson M1A1 was a popular weapon among infantry soldiers, paratroopers, and special forces. The Tommy was a .45 caliber automatic firearm, fed by a detachable 30-round magazine. The submachine gun was an assault weapon by design. It had an impressive performance in urban battles and for clearing trenches. Its good firing rate also provided good suppressive fire support. This is why the Thompson machine gun was extremely reliable, and why it became one of the favorite weapons of American soldiers. Its versatility and power made it one of World War II's most iconic weapons. The K-bar is an iconic combat knife that rose to fame during World War II. Before the K-bar was developed, the United States military used several different combat knives, many of which had issues in durability and performance in combat situations. The knife was engineered to be more durable and versatile than its predecessors, featuring a 17.8 centimeter carbon steel blade and a leather handle. The blade had a strengthened tip and partially serrated edge for improved cutting and piercing. The knife was often used to break open ration cans, cut ropes, and carry out other menial tasks on the battlefield. The K-bar, however, was also an effective weapon for hand-to-hand combat and self-defense, particularly in situations where firearms were not convenient or available. The M1 carbine is a lightweight semi-automatic weapon designed and developed in the United States during the 1930s and used extensively during World War II. Engineered by David Marshall Williams, the M1 carbine appeared as a more compact and easier to handle alternative to the standard combat rifles of the time. The necessity for a smaller, more versatile weapon came from the urge to improve the troops' mobility and responsiveness in a range of several types of combat. The M1 was able to fire in semi-automatic mode, allowing for a faster firing cadence compared to bolt-action weapons. It was specifically suited for officers, gunners, communicators, and other military personnel who required a smaller, easier-to-carry firearm. U.S. paratroopers treasured the M1 due to its compact size, making it easier to jump and carry on the field. The Mark II grenade, also known as the Pineapple, was a fragmentation grenade extensively used by the United States Armed Forces during World War II. The Mark II grenade was a defensive fragmentation grenade, projected to inflict enemy casualties by delivering metal fragments at high velocity after detonation. The Mark II was activated by means of a fuse and detonator system. The soldier would pull the safety pin and let go of the lever, triggering the detonation process. Once the lever was freed, a short pyrotechnic delay of approximately 4 to 5 seconds enabled the soldier to throw the grenade a safe distance before the explosion. The grenade was used in a broad variety of combat situations, such as attacks on fortified enemy positions, urban warfare, clearing enemies from trenches and buildings, and positional defense. The bazooka, officially known as the M1 anti-tank rocket launcher, was a portable anti-tank weapon and came into service with the U.S. Army in 1942. It had a substantial impact on the battlefield, supplying soldiers with a portable and effective attack power against enemy armored vehicles. 2 soldier squads often deployed the bazooka, a rifleman and an assistant who carried additional ammunition and helped reload the weapon. The bazooka had a 60mm caliber and employed a rocket with a hollow charge warhead shaped to penetrate enemy vehicle armor. The hollow charge permitted the rocket to gather the blast energy at a single point, increasing its penetration capability. Boasting an effective range of 150 meters, the weapon proved most effective against most enemy armored vehicles of the time, such as tanks, armored cars, and bunkers. The Browning automatic rifle, known as the BAR, was an automatic firearm developed by renowned American inventor John Browning in late World War I and adopted by the United States Army in 1918. The BAR was an air-cooled automatic rifle fed by a detachable magazine with a 20-round capacity. The weapon used a .30-06 Springfield caliber. The gun had an adjustable bipod, enabling the gunner to lean it on the ground to increase stability and accuracy during automatic firing. The weapon was prized for its reliability and worked well in harsh conditions. Its maintenance was low. Its firepower and ability to maintain a sustained volume of fire on the battlefield were praised. And, even though the BAR was quite heavy and expensive to manufacture, it became a key weapon for infantry support. The M2 flamethrower served an instrumental role in several American campaigns during the Second World War. This incendiary weapon was mainly used to attack enemy fortified positions, such as bunkers, trenches, and underground fortifications. The M2 flamethrower comprised 2 cylindrical tanks assembled on the operator's back, connected to a hose and a launch hose. The tanks filled with a mixture of thickened gasoline, known as napalm, and pressurized propellant gas, such as nitrogen. The operator would hold the launch canister and pull a trigger to release the incendiary compound, ignited by a pilot light at the end of the tube. Serving as a flamethrower operator was one of World War II's most dangerous roles, as he was vulnerable to enemy attacks that could lead to exploding fuel tanks. The weapon also had an effective range limited to between 20 and 40 meters, and it required the handler to get dangerously close to enemy positions to be effective. The Browning M1919 was an air-cooled, bolt-operated mid-machine gun that featured a .30 caliber bullet. The weapon was versatile and could be mounted on tripods, vehicles, and aircraft, and was used extensively on various battlefronts. The M19's firing rate ranged from 400 to 600 rounds per minute, according to the specific model, and was powered by an ammunition belt, making for rapid and continuous firing. Despite being light compared to other models, the M1919 required the use of a tripod or steady mount to guarantee stability and accuracy while firing. The weapon was used extensively to provide suppressive fire, aiding in keeping the enemy pinned down and enabling troops to advance. Owing to its efficiency, the machine gun was also used in the Korean War and even the beginning of the Vietnam War, after which it was replaced. The M1911 Colt pistol was the United States Armed Forces primary service pistol, escorting soldiers in conflicts around the world, including World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Its reliability, usability, and powerful .45 caliber made it a popular and well-respected weapon by military and civilians alike. Many soldiers trusted the M1911 as a secondary weapon for close-range combat, or as a last resort in critical situations. The M1911's straightforward design and serviceability also made it a popular choice among field troops, who frequently faced extreme conditions and hostile environments. Have you ever asked yourself how the Japanese succeeded in controlling a large swath of the Pacific during World War II, despite facing enemies many times their size? The Imperial Japanese Army, apart from the bravery of its soldiers, had modern weapons that tipped the balance of battle in their favor. Today's video reveals some of the weapons in the Japanese arsenal that were behind the Japanese conquest of the Far East. The Arisaka rifle was one of the most significant and iconic rifles Japan used during the first half of the 20th century, including the Second World War. It was named after its designer, Colonel Nariakira Arisaka, and the Type 38 was introduced in 1905. The rifle was comparatively small in relation to other rifles of the time. This gave it a lighter recoil, and it was easier to handle, particularly important for Japanese soldiers who, on average, were shorter in stature than their Western opponents. It was also known for its accuracy and reliability in harsh conditions. Its manufacturing quality was high, with painstaking details. This was the standard rifle of the Imperial Japanese Army during the Sino-Japanese Wars, the First World War, and the beginning of World War II. The Type 38 rifle was replaced in 1939 by the Type 99, designed to match the needs of a modern battlefield. The Type 99 was manufactured in copious quantities and in various versions during the war, including simplified models produced by the Innovate due to limited resources. The Nambu pistol is one of Japan's most unique firearms produced during the 20th century. Named after its designer, General Kiriro Nambu, this semi-automatic pistol was used by the Japanese armed forces prior to and during the Second World War. The Nambu was notable for its distinctive design and features. The Nambu pistol had two main models, the Type 14 and the Type 94. The former, introduced in 1925, was the most widespread and recognizable. The Type 94, launched in 1934, was smaller and had a slightly unique design. Most Nambu pistols used an 8x22mm Nambu cartridge, itself less powerful compared to contemporary European or American pistol ammunition. The Nambu was renowned for its elegant and ergonomic design, with a long, thin handle that fit nicely in the hand. It resembled the Luger P08 pistol, a clear influence on Nambu's design. The Japanese Type 100 submachine gun was the only mass-produced weapon of its kind in Japan during World War II. Brought into service in the late 1930s and introduced in 1942, the Type 100 was a Japanese effort to modernize its infantry weaponry to better match the Allied armed forces. Its introduction was a direct response to the efficiency of the submachine guns used by other nations in the conflict. The firing rate varied between versions, but was typically around 500 rounds per minute. The effective range was short, typical of submachine guns of the time. The weapon had a simple and sturdy design, featuring a long barrel and a wooden stock. The design simplicity was aimed at facilitating mass production and maintenance in field conditions. The Type 100 was first used in the Pacific Theater, where Japanese forces engaged in intense combat in jungles and on islands. It was especially suited to close range and close quarters combat. The Type 92 heavy machine gun was a key piece in the arsenal of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. It was first introduced in 1932 and was designed as the Japanese Army's main heavy machine gun, used for a wide range of roles, from defending positions to providing fire support for infantry attacks. The Type 92 used a 7.7mm Arisaka cartridge, a larger caliber compared to the light machine guns of the time, providing greater firepower. It worked with a tape feed system, allowing it to fire for longer times. It was air-cooled, making it lighter and more mobile than water-cooled machine guns. It was generally operated by a squad of 3 to 4 soldiers and mounted on a tripod, providing a wide firing arc and stability for continuous firing. The Type 92 machine gun had a significant role in Japanese combat strategies, offering vital support in many major battles. The Type 97 hand grenade was the primary hand grenade used by the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. Introduced in 1937, this grenade was a critical component of the Japanese infantry's arsenal, meant to be an effective weapon in trench combat and urban warfare. It was a fragmentation grenade, aimed at inflicting damage by scattering metal shrapnel upon detonation. It was ignited by a time fuse, set in motion by pulling a safety pin, and hitting the grenade's base against a solid surface to start the fuse burning. While an effective weapon in theory, the grenade had some design shortcomings. The ignition method, requiring the soldier to strike the grenade, could be risky. Owing to its potentially dangerous nature, the effective use of the Type 97 required training and caution from the soldiers. The Type 97 hand grenade was a key element in the Japanese infantry arsenal during the Second World War, echoing the abilities and limitations of Japanese military technology at the time. The Kyu-gunto sword was used by Japanese officers until the very end of World War II. Kyu-gunto literally means old military sword in Japanese. These swords mark a momentous transition in Japan's military history, blending traditional Japanese elements with Western influences. The Kyu-gunto design combined traditional Japanese sword styles, such as the katana, with features of Western swords, especially sabers. This hybrid reflected the modernization of the Japanese armed forces and the adoption of Western military practices during the Meiji era and after. The blades ranged significantly in quality and style. Some were reused katana blades, fitted into new grips and sheaths, while others were new Western designs. Apart from being practical weapons, the Kyu-gunto were a symbol of status and honor for the officers. They indicated rank and prestige within the armed forces and encapsulated the warrior spirit of the ancient samurai. The Type 96 light machine gun was an essential weapon in the Imperial Japanese Army's arsenal during World War II. First introduced in 1936, this light machine gun was intended to improve the firepower of Japanese infantry units, drawing on previous designs and adding technological breakthroughs. Partly inspired by the French Hotchkiss light machine gun and tailored to meet the specific needs of the Japanese Army, the Type 96 was renowned for its robust and reliable design. The machine gun fired 6.5mm Arisaka cartridges, the same caliber as the Arisaka Type 38, making ammunition logistics easier. It was prized for its lightness and ease of transportation, plus its reliability in difficult conditions, something essential on very specific fronts. The Type 96 performed a decisive role in Japan's infantry combat tactics, being one of the mainstays of fire support for the troops during the war. The Type 97 sniper rifle was the primary precision rifle for the Imperial Japanese Army snipers during World War II. First introduced in 1937, the design was based on the Arisaka Type 38 rifle, but with specific changes for the long-range precision role, such as adding a telescopic sight, which generally had a 2.5x magnification. It also had a heavier barrel and trigger, adjusted to ensure greater accuracy in long-range shooting. The rifle used the same 6.5 Arisaka cartridge as the Type 38 rifle, renowned for its accuracy and flat trajectory. Like many other armies of the time, the Japanese military started to value snipers more as the war progressed, acknowledging their crucial role in specific combat situations, enabling them to invest significantly in training and improving their equipment. The Type 30 bayonet was the gold standard bayonet used by Japan's armed forces, particularly during World War II. First introduced in 1897, this bayonet was designed to be mounted on a variety of Japanese rifles, including the famous Arisaka rifles. The steel blade was straight, with a sharp single edge and a pointed tip. Its design was sturdy and effective for both lunges and slashes. The handle was usually wooden, with a metal crosspiece serving as a handguard. It came with a metal sheath to protect the blade and make it easier to carry. It was also used as a trench knife and as an all-purpose tool by Japanese soldiers.
During the Second World War, the Soviet Union faced and defeated the Germans in history's bloodiest battles. To achieve success in the Great Patriotic War, the Soviets had to rely on and develop equipment for infantry, thus facing the most modern and experienced army in the world at the time. In today's video, we will look at the weapons most used by Red Army soldiers during World War II. The Mosin-Nagant M1891 rifle was one of the most iconic weapons of the Soviet infantry during the Second World War. Designed in the late 19th century, its sturdiness and reliability made it a valuable option for the extended conflict. The Mosin-Nagant was a bolt gun with a standard capacity of 5 shots. It had an effective range of up to 800 meters, ideal for combat at medium and long distances. Its strengths were its simplicity and durability, and it could withstand extreme conditions on the Eastern Front. But it had limitations. Its old-fashioned design required slow reloading and low-velocity ammunition, making it inefficient in close combat situations. Moreover, the lack of modern safety mechanisms was a risk for less experienced soldiers. Despite its weaknesses, the Mosin-Nagant was a symbol of Soviet resistance, with millions of units produced during the conflict. The PPSH-41 subcompact machine gun, designed by Georgy Shipagin, became one of the Red Army's most iconic weapons. Its high rate of fire and reliability in harsh conditions were vital for the Russians in the conflict. The PPSH-41 fired 7.62 by 25 mm ammunition in a 71-round drum magazine, or a 35-round box magazine. It had a remarkable rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute, ideal for close-range combat, especially in urban settings. But it also had drawbacks. Accuracy was limited, especially at longer ranges, and the high rate of fire could quickly deplete ammunition. In addition, the drum magazine was heavy and could be difficult to reload under pressure. Despite this, the PPSH-41's cost-effective production and ease of use helped offset the weaknesses. It became a benchmark weapon of the Soviet resistance, with over 6 million units produced during the war. The PM M1910 heavy machine gun was a weapon used by the Red Army during the Second World War. Originally adopted by the Imperial Russian Army in 1910, it kept its usefulness throughout several decades of conflict. The PM M1910 used powerful 7.62 by 54 mm ammunition and was water-cooled, allowing for a continuous rate of fire without overheating. This machine gun was usually placed in fixed defensive locations or on vehicles, providing devastating fire support for Soviet infantry. But the PM M1910 had downsides. It was heavy and impractical for rapid movement on the battlefield. The water cooling system, while effective, also required additional maintenance and could be vulnerable to enemy fire. Despite these limitations, the PM M1910 was crucial to Soviet defense during World War II. Its ability to maintain continuous fire and suppress enemy positions was a determining factor in many battles on the Eastern Front. The Degtyaryov light machine gun was crucial to the Red Army during the Second World War. Developed by Vasily Degtyaryov in the 1920s, the DP-27 stood out for its reliability and simplicity. Firing the heavy 7.62 by 54 mm ammunition, the DP-27 had a distinctive drum magazine on top with a 47-shot capacity. The moderate rate of fire, at approximately 550 rounds per minute, helped keep the weapon relatively cool, minimizing overheating. But the drum magazine was bulky and time-consuming. Additionally, the bipod was fixed and fragile, limiting this weapon's versatility and durability on the battlefield. But the DP-27 was highly valued for its robustness and dependability. It could withstand dirt, mud, and extreme weather conditions, vital features on the harsh battlefields of the Eastern Front. The Degtyaryov became an iconic weapon of the Soviet resistance during the Second World War. The Nagant M1895 revolver was another iconic weapon of the Red Army in World War II. Designed by Belgian brothers Emile and Léon Nagant, it had a reputation for being reliable and long-lasting. Equipped with a 7-shot cylinder, the Nagant M1895 used 7.63 by 38 mm ammunition, notable for crimping the barrel during firing, increasing the bullet's pressure and velocity. This allowed the use of a silencer, something rare in revolvers. Although strong and reliable, the Nagant M1895 had weaknesses. Its double-action mechanism was heavy, making it difficult to fire quickly and accurately. Also, the single-shot ammunition was less powerful than the traditional ammo in contemporary revolvers. Still, the reliability and serviceability of the Nagant M1895 made it a popular choice among Soviet officers and sergeants, and it remained in service after World War II. The PTRS-41, designed by Sergei Simonov, was a semi-automatic anti-tank rifle used by Soviet forces during the Second World War. It was intended to neutralize enemy armored vehicles, a major challenge on the modern battlefield. The PTRS-41 fired the powerful 14.5 by 114 mm cartridge, capable of piercing the armor of light vehicles and tanks. The semi-automatic capability allowed a relatively fast rate of fire for an anti-tank rifle, crucial in high-pressure situations. Reloading could be cumbersome in difficult conditions, and the powerful ammunition caused rapid barrel wear. Soldiers using this weapon would target the less protected or vulnerable areas of armored vehicles, as it was ineffective against thicker armor. Despite these limitations, the PTRS-41 allowed Soviet soldiers to face the threat of enemy armored vehicles. The infantry had an anti-tank defense capability that, while limited, was better than nothing in many cases. The Tokarev TT-33 semi-automatic pistol was designed by Fyodor Tokarev in the 1930s. It was mass-produced to replace the Nagant M1895 revolver to modernize Soviet infantry during World War II. The TT-33 is loaded with an 8-shot magazine, firing 7.62 by 25 mm ammunition. Noted for its high exit velocity, this ammunition allowed for greater penetrating capability. The weapon was also known for its reliability and simplicity of construction and maintenance. But the lack of an effective safety catch in the original design was an obvious concern. While the ammunition was powerful, the ammunition capacity was limited. But the TT-33's reliability, firepower, and simplicity made it a revered and common weapon among Soviet forces. It is still remembered as a symbol of Soviet resistance during the war. The F-1 hand grenade became known as the Lemon for its unique shape. This fragmentation grenade was engineered to inflict maximum damage on the enemy, despite the relatively small explosive charge. The F-1 contained about 60 grams of TNT, encased in a thick, segmented casing. When detonated, the casing fragmented into lethal pieces, projecting the shrapnel in every direction. It was an extremely effective weapon in trenches, bunkers, or other confined spaces. But the F-1 had limitations. The fuse delay time, roughly 3 to 4 seconds, could be unpredictable. This often prevented the fighter from making the throw smoothly and accurately. Despite the disadvantages, the F-1 became a favorite weapon among Soviet forces. Its simplicity and lethality in close combat situations made it an essential component of the Soviet arsenal during World War II. The SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle, designed by Sergei Simonov, was a renowned weapon in the Red Army during the Second World War. Allowing Soviet soldiers a greater rate of fire, the SVT-40 was a significant breakthrough in infantry combat capability. The SVT-40 fired the 7.62 by 54 mm cartridge and had a standard capacity for 10 rounds and could be quickly reloaded via stripper clips. Its rate of fire and effective range made it a potent weapon in medium-range combat. But the SVT-40 had drawbacks. Although it was an advanced weapon, it was complex and delicate, requiring frequent maintenance and care. It was also more expensive and time-consuming to produce, making large-scale distribution difficult. Despite these challenges, the SVT-40 proved effective on the battlefield. Still, it was replaced by the more robust and easier-to-produce AK-47 after the war. During the conflict, the Soviets had plenty of work to do to modernize their arsenal while their country was under German onslaught. But the war improvements made the Red Army a military superpower. In your opinion, which of these weapons was most important for the Communists' triumph over the German army? British and Commonwealth soldiers withstood the Axis forces during the Second World War, fighting almost by themselves for a while. In their struggle to withstand the enemy forces, the Crown's brave soldiers had outstanding equipment at their side that became iconic for its battlefield efficiency. Today's video will introduce you to the most iconic weapons used by the British during the Second World War. The iconic Lee Enfield rifle was the mainstay of the British infantry, first introduced in the beginning of the 20th century. This was the standard rifle of the British Army during the First and Second World Wars. Its reliability, durability, and accuracy made it one of the favorite weapons among soldiers. It is renowned for its bolt-action mechanism, providing fast and smooth firing. Fitted with a .303 British cartridge, it had a 10-round magazine capacity, twice that of most contemporary rifles. Its adjustable sights were perfect for varying distances, increasing combat precision. The Lee Enfield stood out in medium to long-range combat. Its ability to load quickly and fire in rapid succession gave British soldiers a substantial advantage in heavy firefights. Its sturdiness allowed it to endure adverse conditions on different battlefronts. For all its qualities, the Lee Enfield had its downsides. It was longer and heavier than many modern rifles, something of a challenge in close combat or rapid maneuvering. Servicing the rifle also required careful handling, especially in dirty and muddy environments. The Lee Enfield went on to represent the British soldier's toughness and skill. The Sten submachine gun had a pivotal impact on the British arsenal. Designed to meet the urgent need for weapons during the war, the Sten was remarkable for its simplicity and low production costs. Made from easily available parts, it could be quickly mounted and distributed en masse to the troops. The Sten gun fired the standard 9mm cartridge, standard among Allied weapons, making ammunition logistics easier. Its 32-round capacity and automatic firing ability made it ideal for close-range combat and guerrilla operations. But the Sten's simplicity was also its handicap. It was often criticized for its dubious reliability and propensity to fire accidentally. On top of that, its hollow build made it prone to dirt and debris, which could lead to malfunctions. But the Sten continued to be a popular choice among British and Commonwealth soldiers for its portability and user-friendly nature in urban combat situations. The Sten was a weapon built out of necessity that went on to become a true symbol of resistance. The Bren machine gun was a crucial weapon for British success in the Second World War. Modeled on a Czechoslovakian machine gun, the Bren was modified for the .303 British cartridge and quickly became well known among the troops for its accuracy and ease of handling. At around 500 rounds per minute, it provided an exceptional balance between firepower and control. The Bren had a curved top magazine, allowing a sharp view of the battlefield. Coupled with its adjustable sights, this made it unusually accurate for a light machine gun. Its quick-change barrel also meant it could be used throughout prolonged combat. The Bren light machine gun stood as one of the most trusted and effective weapons of the British and Commonwealth infantry. It performed a vital role in several campaigns, proving to be a priceless resource on the battlefield. This was not just a weapon, but a badge of military prestige and tradition. The Webley revolver was renowned for its sturdy reliability and signature design. Featuring a short barrel and an ergonomic handle, it was ideally suited for swift and effective use in close-quarters combat scenarios. The revolver fired the powerful .455 Webley cartridge, renowned for its stopping power. The 6-shot capacity and break action rendered reloading fast and effortless, a vital feature in the heat of combat. The Webley's endurance was legendary. Its rock-solid design meant it could withstand the hardships of war, ranging from the muddy trenches to the desert's barren terrain. The Webley continued to be a favorite among British officers. Its dependability, ease of handling, and effective firepower meant it was a sought-after tool on the battlefield. The Brodie helmet was not just a protective piece of equipment, but also a symbol of British military identity. The Brodie helmet was originally introduced during the First World War and was still used in the Second due to its effectiveness. With its unique dome-shaped design, it provided vital protection against shrapnel and head injuries. Crafted from heavy-duty steel, the helmet was long-lasting and able to withstand considerable impact. Its padded interior offered some comfort for the soldier, an important factor during long periods of use. Its versatility made it suited to a range of war theaters, from the European woodlands to the North African deserts. While the helmet provided protection against fragments and minor impacts, it was not bulletproof and afforded poor shielding against direct fire. Its design could also restrict the soldier's hearing and peripheral vision. Nevertheless, the Brodie helmet represented an essential component for the British soldier. The Boy's anti-tank rifle was developed in 1930 and became one of the first efforts to provide the infantry with a handheld means of countering tanks. With a mighty 55 Boy's cartridge, it could penetrate the light armor of enemy vehicles and tanks of the time. The rifle was renowned for its staggering size and hefty weight, making it a challenge to maneuver and operate. It was generally operated in a prone position, using a bipod for stability. One of the Boy's key features was its ability to provide anti-tank firepower to small infantry units, letting them deal with armored threats without requiring artillery or tank support. As the war progressed and enemy tanks became more heavily armored, the Boy's anti-tank rifle started to lose its effectiveness, making it obsolete. The Boy's is celebrated as an innovative anti-tank weapon and marked an important step in the evolution of military tactics and technology. The Piat anti-tank gun was launched in 1943, following the development of more robust enemy tanks. It was a significant improvement on previous anti-tank methods, blending portability with effective firepower. This weapon fired an anti-tank grenade that could punch through medium tank armor. Its portable nature allowed infantry troops to carry it with ease. The Piat did have its drawbacks, however. Its range was fairly short, and the heavy recoil when firing was a major challenge for many operators. The complexity of its mechanism also meant that it required thorough training and maintenance. Notwithstanding these limitations, the Piat served a key role in several battles, while proving to be a highly useful tool for the British and Commonwealth infantry. The Jungle Carbine, known officially as the No. 5 rifle, responded to a need for a lighter, more compact rifle for British troops fighting in jungle regions such as Southeast Asia. It was remarkably shorter and lighter than the standard Lee Enfield rifle, making it optimal for combat in thick, enclosed terrain. Despite its reduced size, it kept the same firepower as the rifles, using the .303 British cartridge. Its agility allowed soldiers to move quickly and handle the Jungle Carbine with ease in tight spaces. Its scope was adjustable and intended for quick engagement with short-range targets. But the carbine's recoil was much stronger due to its reduced size and weight. Also, accuracy problems were widely reported, attributed to issues with the shortened barrel and sighting system. Notwithstanding these difficulties, the Jungle Carbine continued to be a worthy weapon in the unforgiving wilderness conditions of Southeast Asia. Developed early in World War II, the Lanchester was modeled on the famous German MP-28 submachine gun and was conceived to meet the Navy's urgent need for an effective defensive weapon for its crews. This submachine gun proved to be robust and reliable, firing the 9mm Parabellum cartridge standard among the Allied forces. Its firing rate was manageable, allowing users to achieve greater precision during combat. The Lanchester's main strengths were its simplicity and effectiveness. A 50-round magazine offered substantial firepower, making it perfect for close-range defense on ships or in boarding operations. But the weapon was fairly expensive and time-consuming to produce, restricting its availability. The Lanchester submachine gun was a treasured asset for the Royal Navy. Its strength and reliability turned it into an essential tool for naval defense and special operations during the war. In 1940, the sticky bomb was released to meet the urgent need for an effective anti-tank weapon that could be used by infantrymen. Its most distinctive feature was the outer adhesive coating, allowing the grenade to stick to armored vehicles. This weapon was a sphere with a powerful explosive charge. The sticky outer shell was shielded by a layer that the soldier removed before use. Once thrown and stuck to the target, the grenade was detonated, piercing and potentially crippling the tank. One of the sticky bomb's strengths was its simplicity and effectiveness against lighter armored tanks. It provided infantrymen with a means of engaging enemy tanks in scenarios where other anti-tank weapons were unavailable, or in ambushes. But it was extremely tricky to handle and transport due to its sticky and delicate nature, and its grip could be impaired in wet and muddy conditions. Italy, under the guidance of a fascist government, joined the Axis in fighting the Allied armies during the Second World War. To meet this sizable challenge, the Italian arms industry needed to develop weapons worthy of the challenge. Today's video dives into the arsenal of the Italian soldiers, exploring some of the most iconic and decisive weapons of this tumultuous era in history. The Carcano M91 held a key role in the Italian Army's stock during the Second World War. This rifle was renowned for its reliability and endurance, key qualities under the harsh conditions found on battlefields. It was prized for its accuracy at moderate distances, and its light and compact construction made it easy to transport and use by soldiers, including mountain and cavalry units. It faced criticism nonetheless for the limited stopping power of the 6.5 by 52 mm Carcano shell and the magazine capacity, which held only 6 rounds, fewer than some of its contemporaries. The Carcano weighed around 3.9 kilograms and was light in relation to other rifles of the time. The bolt action required the shooter to handle it manually between each shot. Its combination of reliability, accuracy, and handling made the M91 an important weapon for the Italian Army. The Beretta Model 1934 was a widely used and highly esteemed semi-automatic pistol among Italian Army officers during World War II. This model was notable for its excellent reliability, compact design, and user-friendly design, essential qualities for a secondary weapon in combat conditions. With a 9mm caliber, the Beretta 1934 provided an adequate compromise between stopping power and manageable recoil, making it effective for close-range use. While not the most powerful caliber, its accuracy and easy handling made up for this limitation. It had a 7-round detachable magazine, allowing for quick reloads, a significant plus in dynamic combat situations. Its ergonomic design and toughness made it a reliable choice in a wide range of operating conditions. The Beretta Model 1934 was a dependable and powerful pistol for Italian officers in the Second World War. The Beretta 30 had a significant function during the Second World War as the Italian Army's main light machine gun. This weapon was outstanding for its battlefield versatility, despite having some shortcomings that impacted on its effectiveness. A key feature of the Beretta 30 was its ability to be manned by a single soldier, unlike many machine guns of the time that required operating crews. It was ideal for fast-moving tactics and use in a variety of combat environments. The Beretta 30 fired the 6.5 Carcano cartridge, the same one used in the Italian Army's standard rifles, making ammunition logistics simpler. It had a 20-round tape magazine, relatively small for a machine gun, but it allowed for faster resupply compared to longer tape systems. The Beretta 30, on the other hand, had several drawbacks that limited its effectiveness. Its low rate of fire, considerably lower than that of other contemporary light machine guns, was among the biggest culprits. On top of this, the tape feed system was prone to malfunction and required the ammunition to be lubricated, something that could trap dirt and debris, making jamming more likely. Its accuracy was decent, but not on par with the other light machine guns used by other armies. Notwithstanding these limitations, it was extensively used by the Italian Army, enhancing its eminent position in the military inventory during the Second World War. The Lanciafiamma Modello 35 was a flamethrower deployed by the Italian Army during the Second World War, a specialized weapon in the country's military arsenal. It was used for many tactical tasks, particularly to disperse enemy troops from fortified positions or trenches, as well as in urban warfare operations. The Lanciafiamma Modello 35 operated by storing a flammable liquid under pressure, generally a blend of fuels such as gasoline and oil. Flamethrowers had a strong psychological effect on the enemy, frequently forcing them to abandon their positions in fear. Apart from the risk of becoming a priority target, the operator would face dangers such as the risk of the fuel tank exploding, or severe burns if the flamethrower was mismanaged or damaged. Using the Lanciafiamme Modello 35 was often restricted to specific situations where its effectiveness could be maximized, such as when attacking heavily defended positions or in urban combat. Its presence was often powerful enough to force the enemy to surrender or retreat, owing to its frightening and devastating impact. The Beretta M1938A was among the most efficient and broadly acclaimed submachine guns used by the Italian Army during World War II. This model distinguished itself by its extraordinary reliability, precision, and ease of use, rendering it a popular choice among Italian troops. The Beretta M1938A's most notable feature was its sturdiness. Designed to withstand the harsh battlefield conditions, the weapon was known to operate reliably in a range of situations, from the North African desert to the Russian frozen steppes. On top of this, its accuracy was better than many other submachine guns of the time, especially at short to medium distances, and that made it ideal for urban and trench combat. The weapon had a fire selector, letting users switch between single shots and bursts, a useful feature in different combat scenarios. The Beretta M1938A used the 9mm Parabellum caliber, among the most common at the time, and was fitted with a 20 or 40 round magazine. Its fire rate was around 600 rounds per minute, effective in suppressing enemies and close-range combat. But the weapon also had its limitations. Its production cost and design intricacy were higher compared to other contemporary submachine guns, limiting its availability. Also, its weight and size meant it was less ideal for some operations or for troops who needed a more compact weapon. The Beretta M1938A was an innovative weapon for its age, combining efficiency, reliability, and precision. Its presence in many of the Second World War theaters testifies to its importance and effectiveness in the Italian military arsenal. The SRCM Model 35 was a fundamental hand grenade for the Italian military during the Second World War. A key asset of the SRCM Model 35 was its sheer simplicity and effectiveness. Designed to be user-friendly, it was safe to handle by soldiers with basic training in grenade control. Its compact and lightweight design also made it easy to transport in large numbers, so that soldiers were always equipped for close-range combat. The SRCM Model 35 also had an effective blast radius and made sure that the explosion produced shrapnel, increasing the grenade's effectiveness against enemy infantry, making it perfect for neutralizing enemy groups or clearing fortified positions. This grenade formed a vital component of the Italian soldiers' standard equipment, effectively providing a tool for close combat and infiltration scenarios. Its simplicity, effectiveness, and portability made it a highly valuable weapon. The Fiat Ravelli Modello 1935 was a key medium machine gun in the Italian Army's arsenal during the Second World War. It employed the 8x59mm RB Beretta caliber, providing good ballistic performance, and had a fire rate of around 500 to 650 rounds per minute. The main benefits of the machine gun included its enhanced reliability, especially in comparison with its predecessor model. It could offer effective firepower, especially useful in defensive situations or in fixed positions, owing to its ability to be mounted on vehicles and fortifications, as well as its traditional use on tripods. Notwithstanding these positive points, the Fiat Ravelli Modello 1935 faced significant challenges when it came to mobility due to its substantial weight of around 40 kilograms. This constrained its effectiveness in operations involving rapid movement or frequent repositioning. Not only that, but it also had some design shortcomings, such as a complex feed system and a tendency to suffer from harsh conditions that could impact its performance. Overall, the machine gun did play an essential role in Italy's arsenal during the war. The Beretta M37 was a heavy machine gun operated by the Italian Army during the Second World War, fulfilling a crucial role on several combat fronts. The machine gun fired the 8x59mm Beretta cartridge, offering a fine balance between range and stopping power. The Beretta M37's main asset was its robust construction, providing reliability in many combat conditions. This heavy machine gun could supply a significant fire volume for infantry support and position defense, but it was difficult to move quickly on the battlefield, particularly in difficult terrain. It required regular and careful maintenance to keep it functional, which could be a challenge in protracted combat conditions, and its tape feed system could be challenging. The Beretta M37 was generally used in defensive positions, where its sustained firepower could be used to maximum effect against enemy attacks. It was also used in support of offensive operations, providing cover and suppressing fire for advancing Allied troops. Its firepower for extended periods without overheating was a significant advantage in intense combat. During World War II, the German Army had a rather varied stockpile of weapons and equipment. Most of it was assigned to the infantry soldiers, who were responsible for conquering enemy territories and maintaining control of different combat areas. In today's video, we will look at some of the main equipment used by German troops during one of the biggest armed conflicts in history. The M40 uniform was probably the most used by German troops. The M40 was usually produced in a greenish-gray color, called Feldgrau by the Germans. The color of the uniform could change according to the region of the army. For example, the olive-green uniform worn by the Afrika Korps division, which fought mainly against the British in Africa. The M40 uniform also included an internal suspension system. Through this, a soldier could hang an equipment belt through several hooks off the tunic, spreading the gear's weight without using external equipment suspenders. The iconic Stahlhelm steel helmet accomplished the key role of protecting the soldiers' heads from shrapnel and grenade fragments, and also against the firing of low-caliber weapons. The Gewehr 43, also known by the abbreviation G43, is a semi-automatic gas-operated rifle developed by Germany during World War II. The G43 used a 10-round Mauser cartridge and had a firing rate of approximately 30 shots per minute. An optical sight could be mounted on top of the trigger to ensure greater accuracy for the shooter. The G43 rifle was produced in relatively large volumes, with about 400,000 units. The G43 was distributed to sharpshooters and soldiers who were not directly on the front lines. After all, rifles, when exposed to combat conditions, often became jammed and malfunctioned. Most Gewehr 43 rifles were produced using forced labor, mainly in Czechoslovakia and Poland. Therefore, many rifles were subject to parts sabotage or poor workmanship. The Karabiner 98K is a bolt-action rifle, adopted as the standard German infantry rifle in 1935. It was the primary infantry rifle until the end of World War II in 1945. The Karabiner 98K could be modified for specific purposes. A telescopic sight could be added for sharpshooters. A shot suppressor could be attached to the gun barrel for expert marksmen and members of the German Special Forces. A grenade launcher with a range of up to 250 meters could also be attached to the gun barrel. All German soldiers trained before or during World War II were taught to use the Karabiner 98K. Throughout the conflict, the Russians captured millions of weapons from the Germans, which were later used in combat or sold to other countries. Today, it is still active in some less developed countries. The MP40 is a submachine gun designed by Heinrich Vollmer in 1940. The goal was to equip German soldiers with an assault weapon. The MP40 used 32-round 9mm magazines, and its effective range was approximately 150 meters. It was a reliable weapon of cost-effective manufacture. The MP40 was used extensively by German troops during World War II. Its advanced and modern features made it a favorite among soldiers and quite popular in several countries after the war. Total production is unknown, but it is believed that more than 1 million were manufactured between 1940 and 1944. After the end of World War II, many MP-40s were captured or handed over to the Allies. They were redeployed to the paramilitary and irregular forces of some developing countries. The MG-34 was a heavy machine gun of the German Army. It is considered the first modern machine gun. It was air-cooled and used for many purposes during World War II. The versatile MG-34 was clearly the most advanced machine gun in the world when the German Army deployed it. Although the MG-34 was very reliable and dominant on the battlefield, its dissemination by German forces was hindered due to its precision engineering. This entailed high production costs and a relatively slower manufacturing rate. Like most machine guns, the MG-34's barrel was designed to be easily replaced, preventing overheating during sustained fire. Most German tanks and other armored vehicles of World War II used the MG-34 as secondary armament. The STG-44 was the first successful assault rifle. Features included, among others, an intermediate cartridge, controllable automatic fire, a more compact design, and a higher rate of fire. The STG-44 was used throughout the war's Eastern Front. It also had a superior range compared to Soviet submachine guns, making it a remarkable success on the Eastern Front. About 500,000 STG-44 rifles were produced during the war, but they were not enough to save Germany from defeat. The STG-44 also had shortcomings. Its chrome-plated metal body and barrel were prone to overheating. This explains why soldiers wore gloves when handling the STG-44, or the fact that they held the magazine when firing. The STG-44 offered a much greater fire volume compared to standard infantry rifles. The Walther P-38 is a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, developed by Walther Arms as a German Army service pistol at the beginning of World War II. Its development commenced in the early 30s, when the German Army wanted to replace the Luger P-0 pistol. Although elegant, it was expensive and unreliable. The P-38 pioneered the design of semi-automatic weapons. The firing rate was smooth, accurate, and reliable. It was the first locked breech pistol with a double-action trigger mechanism. These features allowed the pistol to be safely holstered, even though it had ammunition in the chamber. About 1.2 million of these pistols were produced between 1940 and 1945. After the war, many P-38s were taken to the United States as war souvenirs by returning soldiers. The Panzerfaust 30 was a cheaply produced single-shot recoilless German anti-tank gun used in World War II. It had a preloaded disposable launch tube that fired a highly explosive anti-tank warhead and could be operated by a single soldier. The Panzerfaust 30 had many limitations. The short range put the German soldier in danger when he tried to fire at an enemy tank, leaving him exposed to the blast impact or enemy artillery. It was a poorly accurate weapon, and mechanical flaws were common, but millions of units were distributed to German troops, making it a stressful threat to Allied armored crews, especially in urban terrain. Thousands of Allied armored vehicles fell victim to the Panzerfaust 30. Had it been developed early in the war and distributed to more trained soldiers, the impact could have been far greater. In World War II, most infantry soldiers were trained to use grenades. Throwing grenades further and further away was an important stimulus to undertake improvements. To this end, the Germans developed the M24 Stielhandgranates. The M24 was the standard hand grenade of the German Army during World War II. German soldiers carried the M24 on the front of their belts, allowing quick and easy access to the explosive. The German military relied on the destructive power of TNT explosives rather than the metal shrapnel effects of conventional oval grenades. The M24 had no effectiveness against sturdy targets, such as tanks and buildings. A common solution was an improvised package charge. where the heads of several grenades were tied around a whole grenade, creating an immensely powerful explosive. The basic equipment of the German infantrymen included survival and fighting items. This covered a Y-shaped leather belt with straps that went over the soldier's shoulders. Attached to the belt were items such as ammunition pouches, a bayonet, sometimes a small entrenching shovel, a ration bag, a water flask, a cylindrical can to carry a gas mask, and possibly even a pistol and holster. A small bag could also be added to the rear carry to carry other equipment. Sometimes the soldiers could bring with him a blanket or jacket rolled on top of the pouch. Starting in 1943, this personal kit was gradually phased out by the model 1944 backpack, as it was more practical. The French Army faced the daunting prospect of confronting Germany and its innovative Blitz war doctrine. Despite having modern weapons, they collapsed against a bold and resolute enemy. Today's video shows the weapons most used by the French infantry in its struggle against the Third Reich. The MAS 36 is an infantry rifle designed by the Manufacture d'Armes de Saint-Étienne in France and taken over by the French Army in 1936. It was conceived to modernize the standard armament of the French Army. The MAS 36 was a bolt-action rifle sized for the 7.5mm cartridge. Its construction was sturdy and straightforward, perfect for mass production and operation in harsh conditions. It was also notable for its accuracy and reliability, although it was considered less ergonomic when compared to other contemporary rifles. The rifle's performance in combat was usually seen as satisfactory, but without exceptional features that made it stand out significantly from other nations' rifles. MAS 36 was widely used by French forces during the Second World War, although production was halted after the 1940 German occupation. Many of these rifles were captured and used by German forces, as well as by some Vichy French units. The FM-2429 is a light machine gun developed by France and adopted officially by the French Army in 1924. This piece of weaponry was matched to the same 7.5mm cartridge used by the MAS 36 rifle, providing important standardization in military logistics. The FM-2429 stood out for its strong and reliable construction, a crucial factor in combat. Its accuracy and effective rate of fire made it more ergonomic and easier to operate than some of its predecessors. This light machine gun was fed by a 25-round magazine, enabling a continuous, sustained fire rate for suppressing the enemy during attacks or defenses. The FM-2429 proved to be a valuable weapon for the French forces during the Second World War. Its combat effectiveness was warmly welcomed by the soldiers, who considered it a significant advance. Despite their defeat by Germany, many FM-2429 units continued to be used by the French resistance. The MAS 38 was a submachine gun designed by France and introduced into military service in 1938. This weapon was developed to meet the need for a light, automatic weapon for the French infantry forces, specifically for motorized troops, paratroopers, and internal security forces. Adjusted for the 7.65mm Longue cartridge, a caliber less powerful than the military standards of the era, the MAS 38 was remarkable for its distinctive design and ergonomics. With a barrel angled downwards in relation to the breech axis, this feature helped manage recoil and improve accuracy during automatic firing. The MAS 38 was prized for its accuracy, reliability, and ease of maintenance. With a moderate fire rate of around 600 rounds per minute and a 32-round magazine, it effectively combined firepower and maneuverability. After being designed in the late 1930s, the MAS 38 continued to be used after the Second World War, especially in colonial forces and police operations. The Model 1935 is a semi-automatic pistol and one of the primary handguns used by the French Army during the Second World War. The pistol was formally adopted by the Army in 1935 and fitted with the 7.65mm Longue cartridge, a caliber developed specifically for French military use. The Model 1935 had an elegant design and was renowned for its reliability and strength. The pistol was fitted with an 8-round magazine. The pistol's overall design influenced several other subsequently developed French firearms. The Model 1935 was widely used by the French armed forces during the Second World War. Overall, the pistol was considered effective for close-range combat and self-defense situations, often as a secondary weapon. When put up against other contemporary pistols, especially German and American models, some soldiers may have perceived the Model 1935 as less powerful. However, its adaptability to the French Army's specific needs was generally appreciated. The MAS 1892 revolver, adopted in 1892, was the primary sidearm of French officers and some other units during the First World War, and it continued to be used in the Second World War, although in smaller numbers, as more modern weapons became available. By then, it was becoming obsolete, but the shortage of more modern weapons meant that it was still used in combat. It was an 8mm caliber revolver noted for its reliability, but it suffered from limited firepower and effective range due to the ammunition's caliber. The barrel was relatively short, making it easier to handle in tight spaces. Notwithstanding its obsolescence during the Second World War, the MAS 1892 remained in service until the 1950s. The French Army's main heavy machine gun during World War II was the Hotchkiss Model 1914 infantry machine gun. This was widely used by the French Army and played a significant role in both the First and Second World Wars. The Hotchkiss M1914 had good defensive position performance and sustained fire support. It was team-operated and typically fitted with a tripod, allowing a stable base for sustained fire. The weapon used 8mm Lebel cartridges and was fed by ammunition strips, common for machine guns of the time. While an effective weapon, the Hotchkiss M1914 was starting to show its age during the Second World War, especially in comparison with German machine guns. Yet, due to its widespread presence in the French Army and its ongoing use throughout the two wars, it is one of the most emblematic weapons of the period. The French helmet used during the Second World War was the Adrian M1926. An upgrade of the famous Adrian M1915 which had been introduced during the First World War. Made of relatively thin sheet steel, the helmet provided protection against grenade fragments and artillery shrapnel, but was less effective against direct fire. The helmet had insignia on the front, indicating the wearer's branch of service. The infantry, for instance, had a hunting horn badge, whereas the artillery had two crossed cannons. The M1926 generally had a dark blue or blue horizon livery, although camouflage variants were often used, especially in operation theaters where the terrain demanded it. Although originally designed for the Army, variations of the Adrian helmet were used by other branches of the French armed forces, including the Navy and the Air Force, each with their own distinctive insignia. The Adrian M1926 helmet is a French military icon, and is a significant step forward in the evolution of personal protective equipment in combat. Frequently associated with the French armed forces, the F1 grenade is a classic defensive hand grenade. It has a long history, first developed by France during the First World War and continuing to be used throughout the Second World War and beyond. The F1 grenade has a typical pineapple design, featuring a segmented metal body. These outer grooves were designed to shatter predictably when the grenade exploded, creating a lethal shrapnel pattern. The grenade's body consists of cast iron, helping with fragmentation. The F1 is intended to be used by troops in defensive positions, such as trenches or shelters. The idea is that the user could throw it out of cover, and the shrapnel generated by the explosion would be effective against exposed enemy troops. The F1 grenade is one of the 20th century's most recognizable hand grenades, inspiring the American and Soviet ones of the same period.
World War II can be the greatest military conflict in history. While it was the source of huge global calamities, it was also a period marked by intense technological advancements. To overcome their opponents, the richest countries in the world invested a lot of money to develop ever more advanced and resistant weapons and vehicles. The war tanks had the objective of knocking down enemy lines and supporting artillery in battles, being true metal monsters. Some were equipped with incredibly destructive weapons, and in today's video, we will learn about the most iconic tanks of World War II. Developed in the 1930s, the Panzer III was the first medium-sized tank to be manufactured by Germany. It was used extensively during the early part of World War II. Although it was useful against many vehicles of its time, the Panzer III quickly found superior opponents in Soviet tanks. It was replaced by the Panzer IV, which had a 75mm cannon and armor that could reach a thickness of 80mm at the front. The Panzer IV was so efficient that it became the most used tank by the German forces and was produced until the end of the war. Its cost was quite affordable and could be manufactured on a large scale. Designed to be a response to the Soviet T-34, the Panzer V Panther features several innovations for German tanks, using a more angular silhouette than its predecessors. The Panther was equipped with a 75mm cannon, and its thick front armor made it an excellent support vehicle on the battlefield. However, despite its efficiency, its history was marked by several automotive problems. Its 600 horsepower engine and neutral steering system were not sufficient to move an average 45-ton tank. This caused catastrophic failures, and the engine would regularly burn itself out. It wasn't until 1944 that the Panther received improved versions and became a source of fear in battle. It was considered by many scholars to be the best German tank used in the war. The Tiger Aus H-1, better known as the Tiger I, was one of the most feared heavy tanks of World War II, with a powerful 88mm cannon and weighing more than 50 tons. It was a real steel monster. The Germans realized the need to have a heavy tank in their arsenal early in the war when they started Operation Barbarossa in 1941 in the invasion of the Soviet Union. In this operation, the German tanks encountered the heavy and tough KV-1, which easily blocked the advance of the German lines. In 1942, the Tiger I was born as a response to their imposing opponents. Despite being an intimidating vehicle, the Tiger I had some mechanical problems. Its excessive weights consumed a lot of fuel and required high maintenance, and it frequently bogged down in muddy terrain. To solve the defects of the Tiger I, the Germans launched in 1944 the Tiger II, known worldwide as the King Tiger. Retaining the 88mm cannon, but using a similar design to the Panther, the Tiger II had an impressive armor of up to 185mm in the turret, ensuring superior resistance against virtually all Allied tanks. When the United States decided to participate in the war, its flagship tank was the N-4 Sherman, whose goal was to combine firepower with maneuverability. The M4 Sherman was a medium-sized tank equipped with a 75mm cannon and relatively good armor. It was also used by other allies, such as France and the United Kingdom. Despite its qualities, the Sherman was known as a dangerous tank for the crew, as it could ignite and explode very easily. A new device had to be designed that used water to surround the ammunition compartment to prevent explosions. With the advent of more advanced German tanks, such as the Panther and Tiger I, the M4 Sherman became unable to sustain enemy vehicles. In 1945, to change this scenario, the Americans created the M26 Pershing. It was named after General John J. Pershing, who commanded troops in World War I. Equipped with an impressive 90mm cannon, the M26 medium tank was a match for the Tiger I. Even though it appeared late in the war, the M26 proved its worth in combat. 10 Pershing tanks were assigned to the 9th Armored Division and were among the first to arrive at the Rhine River when the US forces began entering Germany. With the arrival of the German Tiger II on the battlefields, the Americans developed a heavy tank to rival the King Tiger. The T-29 was a prototype heavy tank, whose production began in March 1944. Its specifications were superior to the Tiger II, with a 105mm cannon, a weight of 60 tons, and 279mm front armor on the turret. The T-29 design was promptly replaced by the T-30, a more advanced tank with a 155mm cannon, plus engine changes and an added automatic system for loading the ammunition. The T-29 and T-30 were planned to enter combat in 1945. However, the war ended that year, and the American heavy tanks did not have a chance to show their efficiency in battle. The infantry tank Mark II, better known as the Matilda, was one of the most important fighting vehicles of the British Army. It was used throughout World War II. The Matilda was mainly used in the campaigns in North Africa, where it supported the infantry, proving highly effective against Italian and German tanks. Its armor was incredibly thick for the time, as much as 78mm at the front, but this made it a rather slow tank and not very maneuverable on the battlefield. During the war, the British Army struggled to develop tank models that were effective enough against German tanks. Although they expected to quickly develop their own tank models, the British chose to adapt the American Sherman tank, adding new mechanical components and a new 76mm cannon. This is how the Sherman Firefly was born. The Firefly began production in early 1944. It quickly became prized, as its cannon could almost always penetrate the armor of the Panther and Tiger tanks in the Normandy clashes. No other British tank could do this safely at the time. After overcoming the difficulties caused by technical adaptations, the British introduced the Challenger A-30 cruiser tank. The first prototype was ready in August 1942, but it had many defects and had to be improved. The Challenger had a 76mm cannon and was the only British cruiser tank with a weapon capable of taking on heavier German armor. However, the rapid technological advancement of German tanks quickly made the Challenger obsolete. It was replaced by the far more reliable and robust Comet A-34 tank. It could take on the German Panthers and Tigers. Even though it entered action only in the final stages of World War II, the Comet remained in British service until 1958. In some cases, Comets sold to other countries continued to operate into the 1980s. Considered by many experts to be the best tank of World War II, the T-34 was cutting edge in mobility, destructive power, and endurance. The T-34 was a tank with a relatively low profile. Its sloping armor was difficult to pierce by most anti-tank weapons of the time. These features, along with a 76.2mm cannon, made the T-34 a highly versatile tank. It was studied and copied by Allied and Axis forces alike. The Soviets also developed a T-34-85, an even more advanced version, with a new turret, with a 3-man crew capacity, and an 85mm cannon, capable of taking on the German Panther and Tiger I tanks. The Soviets developed several heavy armored vehicles, whose names were attributed to Defense Commissar politician Klement Voroshilov. These were abbreviated with the acronym KV. The KV-1 entered service in 1940. It was a heavy tank for its time, with low speed of movement, but virtually immune to the cannons of enemy tanks that year. Also in 1940, the KV-2 appeared on the battlefields, a tank with an atypical shape. Its tall turret had a 152mm cannon, a firepower capable of destroying any World War II tank. But few KV-2s were built, as they were ineffective in combat. They were terribly slow and heavy, and their shots were inaccurate. In an attempt to counter the German Tigers 1 and 2, the Soviets created a super-armored heavy tank, with the design combining the features of the T-34 with a powerful 122mm cannon. The dreaded IS-2 entered service in April 1944, and was used extensively by the Red Army during the final phase of the war. Its main concept was to knock out the front of the enemy line, clearing the way for medium tanks. The IS-2 tanks were a major shock to the German troops. The projectiles fired by the Tiger I were ricocheted off the thick armor of the IS-2. About the efficiency of the Soviet tank, the German General Heinz Guderian even stated, "For every IS-2, we need a whole squadron of Tigers." After the end of World War II, many tanks continued to be used by the armies of different countries, proving that the mechanical and technological efforts developed during the war could survive the advance of time. Since ancient times, generals have always played a key role in wars, being indispensable elements in almost every arms conflict in history. During World War II, the generals of all nations participating in the conflict had to solve dilemmas and overcome obstacles never encountered on the battlefield before. After all, constant innovation in weapons and vehicles made combat progressively more intense. Some of these generals became famous for their brilliance as commanders, others for their peculiar tactics, and there were even the incompetent ones. In today's video, we'll get to know some of the most outstanding personalities of World War II. American General George Smith Patton is perhaps one of the most controversial figures of World War II. His personality is a mix of hero and villain. Patton studied at the United States Military Academy and was an accomplished fencer. In 1915, he was chosen to patrol the frontier along with Company A of the 8th Cavalry in Sierra Blanca, Texas. During this period, he began to use a Colt revolver with a white ivory handle. This gun will become an icon of Patton's image as a typical Texas cowboy. He participated in World War I as part of the Tank Corps of the American Expeditionary Forces and also commanded the tank school in France. His experience as an armored vehicle commander earned him the command of the 2nd Armored Division when the United States entered World War II. Patton led the troops during Operation Torch in 1942 when the Allies landed in North Africa. This allowed them to open a new front against the Axis. He then commanded the 7th Army in the invasion of Sicily, reaching and conquering the city of Messina. Patton's serious and rough personality fit with his aggressive tactics on the battlefield. Several times, the general was reprimanded for making hate-filled speeches and using profanity, although this would have encouraged his troops. On one occasion, Patton crossed the line and even beat 2 soldiers who were suffering from post-traumatic stress. Consequently, he temporarily lost his command position. His picturesque image and his philosophy of leading from the front caused him to receive positive attention, making him a kind of American hero and a typical representation of a World War II general. Some generals were able to encourage their troops even in the most difficult situations. This is the case with British General Bernard Law Montgomery. He fought in World War I, where he reached the rank of lieutenant colonel. He was shot twice, once in the chest, and spent 3 hours on the battlefield before being rescued. He was promoted to general in 1938. During the campaign in France in 1940, he commanded one of the British divisions and evacuated the troops at Dunkirk. In 1942, Winston Churchill chose Montgomery as commander of the British 8th Army in the North Africa campaign. Montgomery inspired the British 8th Army to fight bravely, melting away at the defeatism that had spread among the soldiers. He succeeded in establishing a valiant resistance against the German forces commanded by Erwin Rommel. Montgomery pushed Rommel to retreat, forcing him to withdraw from Egypt after the Second Battle of El Alamein. Montgomery still participated in the invasion of Sicily in 1943 and was part of the planning for the invasion of Normandy on the famous D-Day. With the end of the war, Montgomery received the title First Viscount Montgomery of Alamein and became Supreme Commander in the British Imperial Command in 1946. He was also Deputy Supreme Commander of the NATO military forces from 1951 to 1958. On the Soviet side, General Georgy Zhukov stood out. He was a Russian military man and politician, as well as the most decorated officer in the history of the Soviet Union. Zhukov was born into a humble family and spent much of his childhood and youth in poverty. He fought in World War I as a non-commissioned officer in the 10th Cavalry Regiment, managing to capture a German officer of West Bukovina. He joined the Red Guard in the Russian Civil War in 1918 and was accepted as a member of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1919. However, it was not until 1941 that he was promoted to general. During World War II, Zhukov eventually clashed with Joseph Stalin over how to best recapture Kiev, which was under German control. Zhukov was removed from his position and sent to the battlefront with the mission to recapture the city of Yelnya. Zhukov's victory at Yelnya was widely used as propaganda to boost Soviet morale. The next mission was to organize a defense in the city of Leningrad, where he actively participated in the siege of Leningrad, possibly the bloodiest urban conflict in all of history. Although the Soviets suffered heavy casualties, consecutive victories at Khalkhin Gol, Yelnya, and Leningrad enhanced Zhukov's reputation. In the following years, Zhukov participated in major Soviet campaigns against German forces, achieving valuable victories, such as the defense of Moscow and the conquest of Berlin in 1945. With the end of the war, Zhukov received important military and political posts, and was the main honoree at the June 24, 1945 Victory Parade in Moscow. Authors would later describe this episode as the main moment of glory in Zhukov's career. Heinz Guderian was one of the most active German generals at the beginning of World War II, leading an armored troop in the invasion of Poland in 1939. Born in 1888 in West Prussia, Guderian was the son and grandson of Prussian officers. His childhood was surrounded by military apparatus, living daily with soldiers. In World War I, he was a communications officer and commander of a radio station. Guderian ended the war as an operations officer in occupied Italy. He disagreed with Germany's signing of the armistice in 1918, believing that the Germans should have continued to fight. In the 1930s, Guderian played a significant role in developing the Panzer Division concept and the doctrine of mechanized offensive warfare, which would later be known as Blitzkrieg, a word that can be translated as lightning war due to the rapid advance of armored tanks. In 1940, Guderian commanded the armored units in the invasion of France, pursuing French troops in the Ardennes forest and subduing the Allied army at the Battle of Sedan. Guderian commanded the 2nd Panzer Army during Operation Barbarossa, aiming to occupy territories in the Soviet Union. However, he was unable to advance his troops and was defeated at the Battle of Moscow. Although Guderian was considered an ardent supporter of Hitler's ideas, there is circumstantial evidence that he maintained contact with movements that planned to overthrow the Führer's government. Even in the face of these rumors, which circulated in the upper German spheres, Guderian was chosen for the command of the Court of Honor and became Hitler's personal advisor on the Eastern Front, becoming extremely close to the Hitler regime. When the war ended, Guderian surrendered to American forces on May 10, 1945, and remained in custody until 1948. He spent the last years of his life writing his memoirs, defending the legacy of the German army and his contribution to military science. The Japanese Tomoyuki Yamashita earned a reputation as one of the most ruthless generals of World War II. He was known as the Tiger of Malaya for his actions in the invasion of Malaya and Singapore. The son of a doctor, Yamashita was born in a small village on the island of Shikoku. In the year 1905, he graduated as a cadet and attended Japan's military school. However, his military career almost ended early due to his involvement in cases of insubordination and disobedience to his superiors. Yamashita was considered a troublesome officer, as he supported the idea that Japan should continue the war against China instead of starting a new conflict with the United States and Great Britain, but his views were ignored. In December 1940, he was sent by the government on a mission to Germany and Italy, where he met with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. The following year, Yamashita commanded troops in the invasion of Malaya, and in 1942, he conquered the city of Singapore. Yamashita's 30,000 soldiers captured, wounded, or killed 110,000 men of British, Indian, and Malay troops. It was the British Empire's largest ever surrender, which earned him the nickname the Tiger of Malaya. However, Yamashita's name was forever tarnished after he admitted war crimes in Malaya against military personnel and civilians, and at the same time happened in the Philippines in 1945. Yamashita was tried for war crimes committed by his Japanese troops and sentenced to death. Considered brave heroes by some and bloodthirsty tyrants by others, the generals of World War II reflect men who had the responsibility of deciding the course of the most important battles in the most tumultuous period of history. Leadership has always been an admired and valued trait, especially in the military, where the decisions of commanders can directly impact the success or failures of battles. The generals of the Second World War are a classic example of men who made quick and risky decisions, often coordinating the advance of troops through the chaos of gunfire and explosions. Charles de Gaulle is one of the most important names in French political life since Napoleon Bonaparte. He led the Free French government established in 1940, organizing and supporting the French resistance in the fight against the Axis powers soon after the German invasion. Born on November the 22nd, 1890, in Lille, Charles was the third of 5 children. He began his military career in 1909 and achieved many positive highlights. At 1.96 meters tall, he was successful at the academy and achieved praise for his conduct, intelligence, and resistance to fatigue. In 1914, when World War I broke out, Charles de Gaulle took part in fierce fighting. His baptism of fire came on August the 15th, when he was one of the first wounded at the Battle of Dinant, suffering a gunshot to the knee. That was not Charles's only injury in the war. In other conflicts, he was shot in the left hand and also wounded by a bayonet in the left thigh. He was captured by German soldiers during the famous Battle of Verdun, remaining a prisoner until the end of the First World War. With the outbreak of the Second World War, Charles was chosen to command the tanks of the French Fifth Army, delaying the advance of the German troops. He became a brigadier general on June 1, 1940. On June 9th, Charles flew to London, and for the first time, met British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The relationship between Charles and Churchill was respectful and even friendly, even if the two almost always disagreed on plans to face the war. Charles played a very important role in radio broadcasts, where he urged the French people not to demoralize and to continue to resist the occupation of France. He and Churchill reached an agreement on August 7, 1940, where Britain would fund the Free French, with the bill being settled after the war. Charles organized the Free French forces, and the Allies supported and recognized his efforts. In his negotiations with the British and Americans, he insisted on maintaining complete freedom of action on behalf of France, saying that France should be treated as an independent power by the other Allied forces. After the war, he founded his own political party and was elected President of France. During his rule, he controlled inflation, stimulated industrial growth, and instituted a new currency in January 1960. Charles de Gaulle is regarded as one of the most influential leaders in the history of modern France. His ideology and political style still have a great influence on current French political life. Douglas MacArthur is undoubtedly one of the most iconic generals of World War II. With his rounded hat, aviator sunglasses, and a corncob pipe, his presence drew confidence and admiration from his soldiers. Raised in a military family, Douglas was born on January 26, 1880, in Little Rock, Arkansas. As a young boy, Douglas studied at a Texas military academy, where he was awarded the gold medal for his performance in studies and good behavior. During World War I, Douglas was sent to fight in France, where he served under General John Pershing. He was considered one of the greatest heroes of the U.S. Army Expeditionary Corps. In World War II, he again served in the military. He was selected as Chief of Operations in Southeast Asia, fighting Japanese expansion in the Pacific Ocean, where he commanded the American reaction. Douglas was promoted to general on December 20, 1941, and was put in charge of the U.S. Army forces in the Far East, with the mission of defending the Philippine Islands. A few months later, the famous attack on the Pearl Harbor naval base occurred, and the United States officially entered the war. Douglas MacArthur tried to slow the Japanese advance by mounting an initial defense against the Japanese landings. But soon after the enemy landing in Lingayen Gulf, he realized that he had relied excessively on the capability of his Philippine troops. He therefore ordered a withdrawal to Bataan province. With Japanese forces gaining more and more control over the Philippines during 1942, President Roosevelt ordered MacArthur to retreat to Australia. Upon landing in Australia, he gave his famous speech where he said, "I came through and I shall return." His promise was fulfilled 2 years later, where he commanded American troops in the reconquest of the Philippines. His performance gave him a unique place in World War II history, and he is considered one of the greatest military commanders of the 20th century. and one of the only 5-star generals in the US Army. The Imperial Japanese Army had in its ranks General Hideki Tojo, the country's head of government and leader for much of World War II. He led Japan's fight against the Allies during much of the Pacific War. Hideki was born in 1884 in Kojimachi, a district of Tokyo. He was the third son of Hidenori Tojo, a lieutenant general in the Imperial Japanese Army. Hideki had an education typical of Meiji-era Japanese youth, whose aim was to train boys to be soldiers as adults. This message was relentlessly spread to Japanese students. In March 1905, he was selected as an infantry second lieutenant, serving briefly in Siberia as part of the Japanese expeditionary force sent to the Russian Civil War. A stern and humorless man, Hideki was known for his brusque manners, his obsession with work, and strict behavior. On October 18, 1941, Hideki was chosen as Minister of the Army. He was a strong advocate of the tripartite alliance between Japan, Nazi Germany, and Fascist Italy. While Army Minister, he continued to expand the war with China. His popularity grew in the early years of World War II as Japanese forces won back-to-back victories. However, after the Japanese defeat at Midway, the tide of the war turned and became strikingly unfavorable to Japan. In 1945, after Japan's surrender, American General Douglas MacArthur, commander of the Allied forces in the Pacific, ordered the arrest of more than 40 Japanese military leaders on war crime charges, including Hideki. The former prime minister was found gravely wounded in his home after a suicide attempt, where Hideki shot himself in the abdomen and the bullet pierced his stomach. He survived thanks to medical intervention and was arrested and sentenced to hang on November 12, 1948. Regarded by many as the best general of World War II, Erich von Manstein was one of the most renowned commanders of the Wehrmacht, the armed forces of Nazi Germany. Manstein was born on November 24, 1887 in Berlin. He was the son of Edward von Lewinsky, a Prussian aristocrat and artillery general. Manstein attended the Imperial Lyceum, a Catholic gymnasium in Strasbourg. He was promoted to lieutenant in January 1907 and in October 1913 entered the officer training program at the Prussian War Academy. During the First World War, Manstein served on Germany's western and eastern fronts. He was shot in the left shoulder and knee. A bullet struck his sciatic nerve, leaving his leg numb. In 1939, Manstein was appointed Chief of Staff to Gerd von Rundstedt in charge of the Southern Army Group, which was planning the invasion of Poland. Rundstedt accepted the plans of Manstein, who advocated concentrating most of the armored units in the 10th Army. The aim was to quickly encircle the Polish forces west of the Vistula River. In Manstein's plan, 2 other armies would support the Southern Army Group towards Warsaw, the Polish capital. The German invasion was successful, defeating 9 Polish infantry divisions. The last military unit surrendered on October 6. The next step was to plan the invasion of France. Manstein, with the informal cooperation of Heinz Guderian, proposed that panzer divisions attack in the forests of the Ardennes, where no one was expecting them. In this way, the Wehrmacht would blockade the French and Allied armies in Belgium. Manstein's proposal also included a second operation to surround the Maginot Line. After the falling years of the war, Manstein's strategies were crucial in major conflicts, such as Operation Barbarossa, which aimed to invade the Soviet Union, and the sieges of the cities of Leningrad and Stalingrad. After the end of the war in 1945, Manstein was arrested at the Palace of Justice, the site of the trials of the Nazi organizations and leading war criminals. Manstein was charged with 17 crimes at the trial, 3 of which related to events in Poland. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Eisenhower is undoubtedly one of the most influential names of this historical period. Born in 1890 in the state of Texas, Dwight David Eisenhower graduated from the Military Academy as a second lieutenant of infantry in 1915. During World War I, Eisenhower commanded troops in the embarkation on the Western Front, rising to major. Eisenhower entered World War II in 1942, a few months after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Also in 1942, Eisenhower took part in Operation Torch, whose purpose was to land Allied troops in North Africa to fight the German Expeditionary Force Afrika Korps. The operation was a success, and Eisenhower was appointed Commander-in-Chief of all land, air, and naval operations on the African continent. In 1943, President Roosevelt appointed Eisenhower as Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. One of his first duties was to coordinate the naval landing at Normandy on the famous D-Day. With the end of the Second World War in 1945, Eisenhower fulfilled various roles in his military career. He became interested in a career in politics and ran for president in 1952, being elected President of the United States at the age of 62. With the end of the Second World War, many generals were honored as heroes for their brave deeds and effective strategies. But those who exceeded their authority committed war crimes and had to face trial, with their names forever being stained in history. Swiss neutrality was a hallmark of its foreign policy during the Second World War. But this position did not mean passivity, quite the opposite. The country took active and decisive steps to ensure its defense and sovereignty. While diplomatic relations provided Switzerland with a secure position against German expansion, an invasion threat did exist, embodied in the German plan known as Operation Feuertree, or Operation Tannenbaum. Switzerland, aware of this, took steps to carefully prepare itself for any possible aggression. Conscious of its fragile position in the heart of Europe and encircled by Axis-controlled countries, Switzerland was not happy to rely solely on its neutral policy and diplomatic accords. Switzerland may elect a person to serve as a general in times of war or national emergency. This was the case in 1939, when the Swiss Federal Assembly nominated Ramry Island to the post. He emerged as a vital force in fortifying Switzerland's defenses and in motivating the people to rise and defend their country. His role was to maintain Swiss independence and protect all its territory. Under his leadership, the Alpine nation implemented a series of vigorous defense measures. Its army, running under a militia structure, was mobilized and prepared to respond quickly if threatened. Understanding the strategic importance of Switzerland's mountainous landscape, Guisan focused on modernizing the armed forces and developing defensive tactics tailored to the setting. One key element of Swiss readiness was the execution of the Réduit National strategy. Developed by Guisan, this approach entailed the Swiss armed forces strategically withdrawing to a fortified Alpine region in the event of an invasion. The goal was to establish a natural fortress that would make it extremely difficult for any invader to occupy the country. Switzerland also built extensive fortifications along its borders, including bunkers, anti-tank barriers, and mines, laying the groundwork for protracted defense. Guisan was not only a military tactician, he was also a unifier. His inspirational leadership bolstered the Swiss people's resolve to maintain their independence. He stressed the importance of national unity and resistance, transforming Switzerland's neutrality from a passive policy into an active self-defense attitude. In 1940, General Guisan made a speech that would become famous throughout history as a landmark of independence and determination. He encouraged his fellow Swiss to fight and resist any German invasion, saying that they would fight until they ran out of bullets, at which point they would resort to bayonets, as Switzerland would defend itself against any invader, and its people would never capitulate. His inspirational address and leadership were crucial to preserving national unity. Guisan also kept up communication lines with the Axis nations' military leaders, a diplomatic move that asserted Swiss neutrality while serving as a deterrent to invasion threats. These defense measures, together with Swiss challenging terrain and the resolve of its people, played a pivotal role in keeping the country free from occupation during the war. While other factors also had an impact on Germany's reluctance to proceed with Operation Feuertree, one cannot say conclusively what led Hitler to shelve his plans to invade Switzerland. However, we can safely assert that Swiss neutrality in the Second World War is a chronicle of active readiness and resolute resistance, with General Ramry Island performing a vital role in securing the nation as a stronghold of sovereignty in a tumultuous Europe. During the so-called Great War, the world experienced battles filled with destruction and violence. But the chaos of World War I was only the beginning of a new era, filled with new military inventions that would change history forever. By the end of World War I, the Germans clearly realized that their old biplanes were obsolete. So, in 1930, new designs for new aircraft were conceived, and in 1935, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 flew for the first time. The top 3 German pilots achieved fame flying the Bf 109, including ace Erich Hartmann, credited with shooting down 352 Allied aircraft, including 345 Soviet and 7 United States Air Force aircraft. The Bf 109 continued to be updated throughout the war with new versions, remaining competitive even against the latest Allied fighters until the end of the conflict. In 1942, it began to be partially replaced by the new German fighter, the FW-190, but continued to fulfill many functions on the Eastern Front. The versatility of the Bf 109 meant that it was used in various tasks: bomber escort, fighter bomber, bombed ground targets, among them ground attack aircraft and reconnaissance aircraft. During World War II, the Axis forces developed several ground attack aircraft, which allowed them to destroy military installations and attack valuable enemy weapons and vehicle factories. The Junkers Ju-87 was one of the most feared aircraft of the war. It became known worldwide as the Stuka, a propaganda symbol of German air power and blitzkrieg victories between 1939 and 1942. The Stuka made its combat debut in 1937 in the Spanish Civil War, but did not become commonly used until 1939 in the invasion of Poland that started World War II. The main tactic used by the Stukas was to fly above the clouds until they got close enough to their targets. Then, they would quickly dive towards the ground to fly low and bomb their enemies with as much precision as possible. The Stukas were feared for their unpredictable and fast attacks. But these aircraft had another intimidating feature: the trumpets of Jericho, sirens installed on the landing gear that emitted a loud, ghostly sound during the aircraft's dives. With fewer resources than their allies, the Italian forces had the complicated task of developing a single-engine aircraft on par with the Allied and German fighters. This is how the Fiat G55 Centaur was born. It was designed and built in Turin by the renowned manufacturer Fiat. The G55 was clearly the best Italian fighter produced during World War II, receiving approval from German engineers and even being considered superior to the Bf 109. During its short service, the G55 proved to be a powerful, robust, and fast aircraft, being an excellent interceptor at high altitudes. In 1944, in northern Italy, the G55 fought against the Supermarine Spitfire, P-51 Mustang, and the P-47 Thunderbolt, proving to be a match for its rivals. Despite its efficiency, only 300 G55s were built by the end of the war. While most countries were putting their efforts into developing aircraft with thicker armor and more powerful weapons, the Japanese surprised everyone with their light and maneuverable aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was the main fighter of the Imperial Japanese Navy in World War II. It was the model used by Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, the greatest Japanese pilot of the war. The maneuverability of the Zero was impressive in battle. It could make unexpected turns and reach altitude with great ease. A skilled Japanese pilot could sometimes reverse course and get behind the pursuing aircraft. The lightness and maneuverability of the Zero was due to simple construction, with little or no armor for the pilot or the fuel tank. The aircraft was fragile and extremely vulnerable to enemy fire. The Zero also became very famous for being the primary aircraft used by the kamikazes, and is still considered today an incredible feat of engineering that marked the beginning of Japanese high-precision technology. The Nakajima B-5N was a bomber and torpedo carrier used by the Imperial Japanese Navy. It was the main torpedo bomber in the Pacific War during World War II. The B-5N was one of the main aircraft used in the attack on Pearl Harbor. About 150 of these aircraft hit the North American base with bombs and machine gun fire. In one of these aircraft was Mitsuo Fuchida, the commander of the Japanese attack. It played an important role in the sinking of the Japanese carriers USS Yorktown, USS Lexington, and USS Hornet from the US Navy, and also in the final periods of the war, where it was used in kamikaze attacks. The B-5N was the basis for a subsequent design, the B-6N, which eventually replaced it on the front lines. However, it did not play a relevant role in the war, as it came along late. Unlike the Axis Forces aircraft, the US Air Force developed heavily armored and armed planes, such as the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Its main armament contained 8 50 caliber machine guns, and it could be equipped with rockets or carry a bomb of up to 1,000 kilograms. When fully loaded, the P-47 weighed up to 8 tons, one of the heaviest of the war. The first combat mission of the P-47 took place on March 10, 1943. In the first skirmishes, the American aircraft proved to be quite efficient, especially against German FW-190 fighters. Luftwaffe ace Heinz Bahr admitted that the P-47 could absorb an impressive amount of fire and keep fighting. The P-47 was primarily used as an escort plane for bombers. However, due to its weight, it could only operate at short to medium range. It was also used by air forces of other countries, such as France, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and Brazil. With the increase in fuel capacity as the new versions were refined, the range of escort missions in Europe increased considerably. The P-47 became capable of accompanying bombers in the attacks that made their way into Germany. Another North American Air Force fighter also played an especially important role in World War II, the iconic P-51 Mustang. The P-51 was the answer found to effectively escort bombers. It used a reliable engine and had room for a larger than average fuel load. It was able to keep up with bombers leaving England for Germany while maintaining a good flying range. The P-51's positive prominence meant that it gradually replaced the P-47 Thunderbolt and the P-38 Lightning in bomber escort, as it flew at high altitudes, accompanying B-17 Boeing side by side on their missions. In early 1944, the pilots of the P-51s of the 8th Air Force were instructed to stop flying in formation with the bombers. Instead, they were to attack the Luftwaffe where it was identified. The goal was to achieve air supremacy. Groups of P-51s were sent far ahead of the bombers in a fighter sweep, aimed at intercepting the attacking German fighters. Known as the Flying Fortress, the Boeing B-17 was a heavy bomber used in strategic attacks against German industrial, military, and civilian targets. It also participated in the Pacific War at the beginning of World War II, where it attacked Japanese ships and airfields. Its resilient reputation is based on stories and photos of severely damaged B-17s that made it safely back to base. Its performance in the conflict was enviable, being the US aircraft that dropped the most bombs in World War II. The final version was the B-17G, with 13 guns of different calibers throughout the aircraft, ensuring a considerable level of defensive options against enemy fighters. For their part, the British had the incredible Supermarine Spitfire, the best British fighter of the war, and possibly the aircraft produced in the greatest number by the British Air Force. During the war, many versions of the Spitfire were manufactured, which tested different wing layouts and armaments to achieve a short-range, high-performance interceptor aircraft. During battles, Spitfires were usually tasked to take on Luftwaffe fighters, especially the Bf-109 series aircraft, which were a close rival. Later versions of the Spitfire had 8 Browning machine guns, ensuring excellent firepower. Still, it could not defeat the Japanese Zero in a direct confrontation, making it necessary to create combat formations in confrontations in the Pacific. Loved by its pilots and admired by enthusiasts worldwide, the Spitfire fulfilled various roles including interception, reconnaissance, and fighter-bomber missions, continuing in that role until the 1950s. In October 1942, the Yakovlev Yak-9 went into operation, considered by many to be the best fighter made by the Soviet Union and the one responsible for ending the Luftwaffe's supremacy in the skies. The Yak-9 was produced between 1942 and 1948, with over 16,000 models built. The versatile Yak-9 had several types of armaments for anti-tank, light bomber, and long-range escort functions. At low altitude, where it predominantly operated, the Yak-9 had a maneuverability advantage against its enemy, the German Bf-109. The Yak-9K variant was equipped with a powerful 45mm cannon capable of destroying any enemy fighter with one clear shot. One of the best pilots of the Yak-9 was First Lieutenant Vybornov, who won 19 aerial victories and 9 shared. He was awarded the Gold Star Medal of Hero of the Soviet Union in June 1945. With the end of World War II, many fighter planes continued to be used in various countries, and many technological innovations developed during the war allowed the future of aviation in the world to be perfected.